2017. The idea was there before that. But the first service, the first movement of ART began in 2018. Okay, 2018 in the town called, please forgive me if I pronounce it wrongly, Zhuzhou. Am I pronouncing it correct?
Zhuzhou.
Yeah, please forgive me if I pronounce it wrongly. Okay, it started in 2018. Okay, and it's been there ever since. And based on the reports and writings, China is the only one right now who operated on public basis. Yes, indeed, there was one in Dubai, but they run it as part of the test drive, part of the preparation for the upcoming World Cup, where they intended to use this mode of transport as part of their transport system to minimize the amount of cars on the road and stuff. Okay, but then again, the idea what is art is very simple, which is a crossover between train, tram, and road transport.
Well, maybe. Sorry, Adi. Sorry, I'm so sorry to cut you off. Maybe just to give a little bit of background to our viewers today, I can share one article.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry. Where is it? Sorry. Yep, here. So one article. So this is what Adi was talking about just now, that it was introduced in China.
Yes.
So there's this China Daily actually reported this.
Yes.
China's self-driving trackless rail bus starts from first overseas run. So I mean, this is what we are talking about today, ladies and gentlemen. Just to give a little bit of background, in case you can't imagine what it is about.
Yeah, and then Mal, thank you very much for sharing this picture, because the picture will eventually explain the thing that we discussed just now. If you look at the picture, it has no track under it, okay, as compared to normal train or tram that has track, but over here they have none. But if you look at it properly, they have that white lines. So technically, those are its track, but it moved not on that, but moved by the sensor recognizing those tracks. So pretty much the movement of the transport itself will follow the track, similar to the train, but still it moves on the road.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for that explanation, Adi. Maybe now I can move on to Dr. Erwin. Sir, I think on regulation issues, there might be some overlap in regulations, because right now we don't really know where this mode of transport falls into. We don't know whether it's a train, we don't know whether it's a tram, we don't know whether it's a bus. So what would be your comments in terms of legal principles?
Okay, this is, thank you, Mar. This is rather interesting. Well, if you look at it, it's like a bus because it has tires and it's on a road. On the other hand, it has, like sort of a locomotive up front. And then it has, trailers at the back for its passengers. So it's like a train. But strangely, although it shares the same space as, say, buses and cars and lorries, etc., but it's sometimes referred to as a train, sometimes referred to as a bus. So it's a little bit of both, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like to quote the lyrics of a famous song.
Okay.
So it has actually the characteristics of both. Now, that actually puts us in a whole lot of trouble, because if you look at the way Malaysian laws are drafted, it is very traditional, very conventional, very old-fashioned in a way. If you look at the regulatory part, railways are now regulated under the Land Public Transport Act of 2010. As amended, of course, there have been amendments over the years. The most recent of which is the 2018 amendment, where the status of the commission was actually downgraded, and now that actually runs as a department within the Ministry of Transport. Right. So that particular statute regulates both trains, like railways, and it regulates buses as well, and taxis, you know, amongst other things, limousines.
Yeah.
So there is a very distinct separation between the two. Like buses and all fall under the bit on public transport vehicles, and then railways has their own separate chapters within the statute.
Yes.
So when you have something like this, and it sort of crosses the boundaries, right? It has like 1 foot in one regulatory regime and 1 foot in the other. That causes schizophrenia, I suppose, if you're a regulator. So what? When you look at your statute and you think, right, should I regulate it as a bus? Maybe, or maybe not. Or shall I regulate it as railway? Maybe yes, maybe not. So maybe this confusion can actually be taken away with specific legal drafting where you need to amend the statutes. So you can have a special category for this, you know.
Right.
So if we look at some of the current definitions that you have in the statute, right? If you ask yourself this question, right, could this actually be railway? Well, you know, the definition here refers to rolling stock, right? Which I suppose the art head unit and the wagons and, you know, the coaches at the back could be classified as rolling stock, but it doesn't have rails, it doesn't have cables, it doesn't have sidings, etc., which is what is typically found in a railway network. However, the definition has sort of a catch-all at the end, which is any guided system or guided systems of a class prescribed to be a railway. So I suppose if you have regulations, you can sort of bring this into the classification of railway, because the guided system that ART has is actually image recognition. So what it does is, you know, the two little lines which Adi pointed out to earlier. Yeah, it is actually a guiding line on the road itself where the camera on board the ART captures, and then that is processed in the system, and then the vehicle is then programmed to just follow that. And then I think that it has the usual things like collision avoidance systems, etc.
Right. But I'm sure even though with this kind of guided system, there will be a tendency of accidents, or what if suddenly one of the lines is not clearly painted on the road, you know? What if that happens? I mean, how do you think this will
before we go on to that, right, can I tell you also first why this is probably not a bus, right? If you look at the schedule to the Land Public Transport Act, right, there are 8 categories of buses there. It doesn't fall into any of those 8 recognized categories. You know, you have the stage bus, charter bus, express bus, minibus, employee bus, feeder bus, school bus, and airport bus. It doesn't fall into any of those categories.
Right.
Right. And then on top of that, if you look at the definition of motor vehicle, which is fairly broad, you know, under the Road Transport Act, right, of 1987. Right. So it actually basically covers a vehicle of any description, which is good. And then it doesn't really tell you what sort of propulsion mechanism can be used, as long as it's propelled, you know, and it's capable of being used on the road. So that's good, right? And then as long as it's capable of moving or being moved on the road, it is a vehicle. But the problem is, although that part of the definition in Section 2 of the Road Transport Act is broad, sadly, if you look at Section 5, there are again various categories of vehicles for purposes of registration and licensing in Section 5. None of it falls into those categories. I mean, this ART does not fall into any of those categories, right? So it is going to be a regulatory problem, right? So now, your question just now, Ma, was, what if someone forgets to paint the stuff on the roads, right? Right. What if the lines sort of get blurred? Yeah, who would have thought that there would be blurred lines in a transport, you know, related issue? Right. Sounds like a song, isn't it? Right. So anyway, it would be the person who is tasked with the responsibility of painting the line. So at the moment, I assume that, if there is a rail operator, the rail operator has to make sure that the track is in order. So the rail operator has to ensure that it is properly painted. So painted to a certain degree of accuracy and intensity that the image recognition devices, the sensors, can actually pick up on it. Yeah,
Okay,
but then that also leaves the issue of, like, what if, a big what if here.
Yes.
Someone plays a prank, and then sort of paints the track, in a direction, which leads off the official designated track. Can you imagine a terrorist attack in the future next time where the terrorist attacks by bringing a paintbrush along, and then they paint all these white tracks, along, right? And then you just take this train off the track,
Yeah.
So what happens when there's a branch? I suppose there are protocols with that, that's an algorithm to deal with it. Right?
Correct. So
Yeah, and then maybe it's going to be supplemented with GPS, and then you must follow that as well. So these are technical details we don't really have yet. Maybe Adi can enlighten us on that.
Yeah, so I think Adi, I have a question for you in relation to what Dr. Arun just said. With all these issues, with all these, problems which might arise in terms of the road structure in Malaysia itself. Can I get your views on whether the road structures in Malaysia are reliable, good enough, or are they ready for art?
Okay, first of all, I want to correct my point just now. It's not Dubai. I'm sorry for that one. I'm misled on that one. It's Qatar. I'm sorry for that one. First of all, I need to correct that one before people start bashing me, especially Prof. Wi. So again, okay, when it comes back, when we come back to this ATR, it need to have a proper road. I mean, need to be smooth, need to be straight, and I don't know whether they can climb. I mean, steep rope or something like that. Because as about the time being, there are only 2 places in the world, I mean 3, including Qatar, that this mode of transport has been run. But none of them involve a mountainous type of places, as first thing first. Secondly, I would like to use this analogy. I don't know whether people will agree or not. To use this transport, you have to make sure that hypercar like Bugatti, Lamborghini can use that road, then only this mode of transport can go. But if we have a road that require us to ride on Pajero, Land Cruiser, then Evoque stuff. So I do believe that we need to make sure that the road is, compatible first, because the amount of information that we have as to whether this transport can go through various type of road is somehow limited. And if you look at the report, they've been published in January 2021, they intended to start or to run the test run this transport in Iskandar, which the area have very good road facility and stuff. But try to take into consideration the idea that been taken before. They want to test it in Penang and Sarawak. What would happen over there? So still, we have less information on that one. But again, as per mentioned by Prof.
Adi, can I just qualify your statements there? You're not saying that Penang and Sarawak don't have good roads, right?
Yeah, they have.
Yeah, they do have good roads.
Yeah, they have good road. I'm not saying they don't have good roads, but limited. Okay, that's the word, limited. Thank you very much for correcting me.
Yeah,
they do have good roads, but limited in terms of number. Still, the challenge is so obvious. Okay, the challenge is so obvious. Okay, where they try to test in Iskandar, of course, they have a good facilities and whatnot. And also the area that they test in China, also they have a good road. But in Malaysia, it's still a question that need a proper attention from the rightful people to answer that question, because we have so many accidents involving the condition of the road. I'm not saying that we don't have a good road, but it's limited. That's the key, limited. Thank you very much for addressing that point just now.
All right. Okay. So you have mentioned about accidents and injuries and whatnot. Just now, you mentioned. Maybe we can look into this in terms of the legal perspective, because in For example, if you ride a bus and you're injured, get into an accident, you know who to sue, and you know who is at fault. But this one, I believe that there is no designated driver, so per se, because the art is going to be transported or is moving as per the line. So there's no designated driver per se, right? In case of any accidents or injuries or any of some sort, who can be liable for this? Prof, if you can take this away.
Okay. We are back again to the original question, right? Is art actually a bus or is it a railway system? Right? Because the legal basis, right, will be different. Right, but whatever it is, right, you know, let's address the pink elephant in the room, I suppose. Because you have no driver, right, it simply means that liability will have to be taken on by the operator. So it's the operating company, right?
Okay.
So now with that out of the way, right, I'm assuming here, right, that it is the operator that owns the system and the company is also operating it. Right, you know, like I'm assuming here that it's probably not the same as with our LRT system, right, where Syarikat Prasarana actually owns the assets and then there is an operator company operating the services. Right. So let's have a look at what if you classify this particular system as a railway system. Right. So if it falls under the regulatory framework for rail, right, what happens here is that there is actually a section within the Land Public Transport Act, which is section 143, which we will have to pay close attention to. This says that a railway carrier cannot be a common carrier. So there are basically two different status which a carrier can have, either a common carrier or if that status is ousted by way of statute, that means by default, the railway carrier here, or which means ART, is a private carrier of passengers. So it's a private company, therefore it's a private carrier. That means the passengers who buy a ticket and go on board this particular vehicle will be contracting as passengers with a private rail carrier. So if anything goes wrong, you know, if there's something wrong with the transportation, if they get injured, etc., their choice of legal action will be against the operator based on either breach of contract or negligence, you know, if you do not want to use a contract. But if there's a contract, it's usually easier to use the terms of the contract. Now, the legal basis, if we treat this particular system, right, as a bus is, well, slightly different. Because if you look at the statutory drafting in the 2010 Land Public Transport Act, there is no specific statutory ouster for buses. So buses, because of the way they practice their business and because of the way they are licensed, they are arguably common carrier of passengers. So if you are a common carrier of passengers, there is a common law obligation to actually serve the public. You know, you have to stop at all the designated stops and pick up passengers. You cannot say no to that.
Yes.
So there is a duty to take care of the passengers, and it is basically a duty to exercise reasonable care. Then the breach of this standard of care is usually considered a tort. It is not described in case law specifically as negligence, although some judges have referred to it as, you know, negligence in a way, because, you know, there's a failure to exercise reasonable care, but it is a specific tort on its own, specific to common carrier of passengers. You know? So the legal basis for it is different. So bearing that in mind, right, so it's important that we actually get the definition right.
I think that is probably one of the challenges, right, Dr. Erwin, to get the definition right. Because right now, as regulators, I think they need to look at the system and look at by looking at the system, then only they can properly define art, or maybe come up with a new definition. Thereby, I think by coming out with new definition, they will need to come out with new regulations as well, specifically for art. So I think that will be one of the challenges under regulations. Are there any other challenges under regulations, under regulating art, which you think might arise in the future?
One thing that I see, right, is probably passengers who want to get on a system like this, they're probably going to get worried in the sense that if something goes wrong, what if the company goes insolvent? Who am I going to sue then? Right. What if the companies are set up in a way next time where you have one operating company having one particular line, and then all they have are just basically a few assets? It's not like a whole railway network, when you can actually seize the entire property, you can actually take the railway network itself and sell it off. But here, the roads belong to either the state or the federal government. You can't do that. So all you have are actually literally the wagons,
And the plane.
Yeah, and the train itself.
The plane.
Yeah, the thing. Yes. So I suppose that is worth some money, but what if many people are injured? There are many claimants. Will there be enough money in the pot? So I think insurance is an important issue here. Is the operator required to take on liability insurance, and how much? So these are issues which need to be clarified. So will there be, for example, a cap on the amount of claims that can be made by passengers? We don't have information on that as well. So these are issues which you will have to consider later on.
Especially
so this
as
is the financial
regulators,
side, especially as regulators. Yes.
All right. Okay. So Adi, maybe on your side, you may want to share with us any other challenges. I believe Dr. Erwin has already addressed challenges on the regulation aspect of it. What about you? What do you think would be the challenges in implementing art in Malaysia?
Okay. To address that point, I would love to go a few steps back and look at it to a bigger point of view. The one that we discussed just now, which is the legal part of it, happens to fall under I would consider as non-physical challenges. Which means this is the type of challenges which we cannot see, which cannot foresee. The things that are there, but we cannot, touch it on, it's not physical. Okay, and we have another one, which is the physical part, the one that we discussed just now halfway, which is on the road itself. So I would like to add on the non-physical part. Okay, we already discussed on the law itself. I would love to discuss on the economic part of it. Will this transport be, economical in terms of its operation? Will it give us, the user cheaper options of transport? Can it gather the interest of the people to use it? Because there's a lot of doubt yet as for the time being, where it will be operated, or who's going to be the target market, who's going to be the main group of people that they want to attract. So there are a lot of things that are still, I would not say unknown, but still limited in terms of its amount. That's the reason why, based on the news, they've given Mitrans, I believe Mitrans, to conduct a feasibility study on this transport to gather more information. And the info itself is so limited to the point that the only reference that we have right now is from China. Okay, the China. But again, the test run that been done by them is only in the area where the density is not that high. They aim to put it in the area where the city is developing. It's not developed area. Okay, if we can put into perspective the area that they run the service. Okay, I jot down the numbers. The density of that area is about 300 for Zhuzhou, 340 people per square kilometer. Okay, But if you compare it to Penang, Penang have 1,666 people per square kilometer, and in Kota Baru they have 1,290. So can we consider the data that we see for China is accurate for us to look into as the effect, the economical effect of it? And also, with the current situation of COVID-19, can we gather the interest of the public to use this transport later on? Because the concern right now is, first of all, with regard to the virus, and secondly, still under economic public, if the fare is not that cheap, I mean, it's not cheaper than other alternative, I believe that people will opt for a more, pocket-friendly type of transport. Even if you look at the what we call it, the number of car sales in Malaysia right now, it start to get higher. Why? Because the price start to drop. People are getting quite a good amount of salary, and they can afford to have car. And why must they opt for public transport, which they have to spend their time? Where if they ride the car, they can have their own time. So on economic wise, they save more on that side. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked into before we can safely say that it is more economical to run this service in Malaysia. And again, as per mentioned by Dr. Prof. Wee just now, in terms of asset, they have to rely on other parties to provide them with the asset. For example, the one that we discussed now, the road. They cannot build their own road. They have to rely on others. Okay, the only thing that they can provide is first, the transport, and the second one, as per mentioned by Prof. Wee, the paint.
The paint. I'm glad I brought up the paint.
That's the topic of today, the paint. Okay, but other than that, in terms of the land, the road, they have to rely on the steel. That's another topic of that falls under economy. So from my point of view, there's still a lot of gray area that can be entered on top of legal issue, which is so obvious right now. You cannot determine whether this is a bus or a race, because if you read through the news, please correct me if I'm wrong, some of them consider as a bus, some of the report consider it as a train. So if we cannot determine which is which, so how we going to move forward? So I do believe that, yeah, on top of economic challenges, we have physical facility challenges, we have legal challenges, and also on top of that, we have demand challenges. Because the road, if you look at the operation that been done in China, they tend to go through areas which the density is not that high, first thing first. Secondly, they did not go through the what we call it, places of interest, whereby we have a lot of people that visiting those places. They go to the places which have less people. So what will be the option for us if we want to implement it in Malaysia? If we put it like, for example, in Iskandar, who's going to ride it? So if if the number of people is limited, then can you make profit out of it, or at least break even out of it?
All right. Okay. Thank you, Adi, for that very comprehensive discussion on economic effect of it. I have a question here actually from Facebook. We have Encik Ramlan Zainul Abidin. I just read out for you. His comment is, maybe we forget that the responsibility of manufacturer to comply with current regulations. Have you all approached the manufacturer to understand if they have taken all steps to comply with regulations? Any takers for this? Prof?
Prof.
Okay, thank you, Marley. That is why you need a licensing system, because the licensing provisions will provide that. I'm assuming that if finally we end up classifying this as a bus, it will have to be roadworthy, right? So the requirements of roadworthiness will have to be addressed by the current regulatory body for roads, which is JPJ, which is rather interesting, right? No, they are finally stepping out and regulating something which is train-like under their portfolio, right? So the expertise, right, will be more than just checking tires, because now you have sensors which are used in, image recognition.
Yeah.
So that sort of expertise will have to be brought within the regulatory system to see whether the algorithm running it, is actually working, whether the sensors are operating according to specifications. Right, so the roadworthiness requirements are usually part of the licensing system. Right, and then if you're wondering whether passengers are entitled to expect such terms to be implied into the contract, I would argue yes. Right, so they can expect that such vehicles should be passenger worthy and roadworthy before they even step into it. I would also like to address a few things which sort of piqued my interest when Adi spoke about, like density. As we know, right, trains are usually at its best in high density population areas.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so if you can operate that in a high density area, then I suppose it will be a good thing. The second thing is, I think data on this. We don't really have much data on this. Even when I was trying to access, China, information from China on how do the Chinese actually regulate this, I could not actually find something which I could use. I'm only bilingual, so unfortunately Mandarin is not one of the languages which I either read or speak.
It's okay. I think more information is coming up soon.
Yeah, hopefully, so that could be an official translation, which I could use next time.
Yeah.
And then there's also the pink elephant in the room, which I think Adi sort of alluded to earlier, which is, you're going to share the same space.
Yeah.
The art and buses are going to be on the roads together.
Yeah, sure.
The hell has right of way,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If it's a huge lorry or huge bus versus the art,
yeah,
who gets to go first?
It's true.
Right. So I hope
Yes.
they don't end up playing chicken in a way, But anyway, can I just perhaps suggest that there are certain things in the rules which should help you, currently under the road traffic rules from 1959, which is referenced as LN 166/1959. If you look at Rule 17, capital letter C1, there's actually a prohibition of driving in the bus lane. So if you have a designated lane for the art, which I suppose in the future they're probably going to share it with ordinary buses as well. So prohibition of any other traffic vehicles, right, from actually entering to that lane should also apply. But I can tell you, that this requires education beyond what we currently practice here, because I commute to KL almost daily still, because I have
driving
duties to
your
perform.
car.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sort of a Grab driver.
But I do agree, I think, Dr. Erwin, on that particular
Mm.
issue, because we do need a designated lane. Because if not, people will tend to just, abuse that. Even with designated lane, people abuse it. Yeah.
So we can use existing bus lanes and then maybe modify it, just paint like extra lines on it.
Paint.
Yes. So the sensors can actually pick up on it.
Right.
But, if you notice how drivers act like in KL, people are just going into those bus lanes all the time. Like I'm usually in shock, seeing, okay, here's a motorbike going in, here's a truck going in. Here's another car overtaking on the left.
So I think this was my concern earlier when I asked about accidents and injuries, because of this tendency of abuse of that designated lane. Then it could raise some sort of legal issues to it. But I think Adi, you wanted to add something just now, what Prof. Erwin wanted to say.
Yeah. I just want to extend what been discussed by Prof. just now. It's not only the issue of licensing for the operators. We also have to extend the legal part of it to the what we call that, facilities provider. I mean, to build the next road, which meant for this mode of transport, we need more than just the paint. We need more, like we have to have a standard specifically for this road, this transport. And to do that, it won't be a cheap option. It won't be a cheap option. Okay, that's the first thing first that I want to add. Secondly, I want to add about the what we call that, the efficiency of train. Yes, it's true. If we look at the history of train in Southeast Asia, particularly because that's the area that I'm focusing on right now. If you look at the station for KTMB especially, they've been plotted according to the area which could give the most economic benefit. Okay. Back then they have these lumber, tin, all those kind of raw materials from Malaysia. So they put the station over there. Okay, but if we move on to the the current the modern era, we can see right now those stations are no longer profitable for KTMB. If you look at it properly, who wants to go to Mentakap by riding KTMB? I don't know who wants to go there by riding the train. Who wants to go to Gua Musang riding the train, or Kuala Lumpur? Those stations are no longer profitable for us. But if you look at the metro train, okay, the way they plot the station is based on the density of the people, how many people go to that place. But for this mode of transport, if you want to do something like that, you will be, please forgive me for using this system, you will be, the operator will be in the same wrestling area as the other road transport. They have to struggle. They want to change the lane. They have to struggle and fight for it with the motorcycle, rider. They have to fight with the cars. They have to fight with the lorries. So, in terms of time, journey time, it will not be shorter. It might be longer, and people will not go for that option. Those are the two points that I want.
Maybe what you're saying is that it doesn't really help with the congestion of traffic.
Yeah,
it might add to it.
Yeah, it might
that's
add,
what
just like
your
what
view
we
is.
said just now. Yes.
Right.
You know, right. One way to prevent like vehicles from crossing all the time is basically maybe to run the route in such a way where you only make left turns on the Malaysian road.
Yeah.
Right. So you never cross two sets of roads, two lanes, You're actually crossing into traffic, So, but then that raises the question, like, for the vehicle to go into traffic, will that art have the right of way, or will the other vehicles have to stop?
Yeah.
Like if we adopt simple, like courtesy rules as what's practiced in the UK, say for example, if there's a car that wants to come out from a junction, the other vehicles just
automatically
slow down and stop,
Yep.
and then let the car out first. But that would mean educating the Malaysian public to drive in a manner which is quite alien to many such drivers at the moment. I don't mean to insult many Malaysians, but that is the scary thing that you see on the roads.
Yeah, education is very important, I think, especially when you want to introduce a new thing. And for this, it might affect the public in masses. So I'm sure education is very important. I do have one very interesting question here by, again, Mr. Ramlan Zainal Abidin. His question is, did you all know that art can be interfaced with smart traffic signaling? Any takers for that question?
Oh, please.
I'm not sure. So the question is, did you all know that art can be interfaced with smart traffic signaling?
No, I didn't know that. Okay, but if it could, that's a good thing. Do we actually have smart traffic signaling here?
So we will get back.
We will come to a stage when, all the traffic signaling that we have is sort of smart in a way.
Yeah.
Because the sensors which are required for that, I think the prices have sort of plummeted. It can just be literally distributed along the roads, and they can be ubiquitous, right? So you can actually tell whether a car is there, so whether that part of the road is occupied by a vehicle, and therefore whether you need to prolong traffic lights or whether you need to shorten the lights. So it's really not that difficult to implement, but I don't really see that happening. I suppose the only smart traffic system that we have is a huge counter in the front, right, which tells you, okay, there's like 60 more seconds to go. So, you know, you don't need to really rush, you know. Right, and it's also a reminder to people, you know, when the light turns yellow, you should actually slow down.
Slow down.
Yeah, you know, so if you see 5 seconds left, you know, maybe it's time to slow down and get ready to stop, as opposed to speeding up and try to cut through the light.
All right.
Anyway, thank you, Ramlan, for that. If you have any further information on integration, please post it in the chat. I'm sure all the other people who are listening to this would also want to have a look at that information.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I think,
you know, when there's so much of integration, you know, with information systems that we have today, you know, like GPS on your phone, etc. And hopefully next time we have a car that can actually take that sort of information. So cars that are hooked up to satellites and all. So I don't see that this should be a problem in the future. So we should take advantage of technology like that, you know, to make our lives easier.
I think this Mr. Ramlan might be on behalf of the manufacturers, because he just made a comment to say that's why you should talk to manufacturers like us. So I think Mr. Ramlan, if you're you know, if you're interested, we can have a talk on this, and we can maybe discuss more about this privately. And I mean, it is very interesting to see this, because the manufacturers have their own set of views, and I'm sure the regulators are also looking into this. The regulators cannot regulate without understanding the way it is built. So definitely regulators have to talk to the manufacturers. But I mean, today's discussion is only for us to look at what are the challenges, what are the issues. We are not the regulators per se. We are here.
I think, Mark, you have,
yes.
I mean, accidentally point out one challenge as per a question by the viewer just now.
Yes.
He mentioned that you need to talk to the manufacturer. Then you mentioned that, yeah, that's one of the challenges, which is communication. I mean, how are you going to, I mean, what can we do to make sure that we can link up? I mean, one person can see the other's view and vice versa. So today we talk about the legal aspect of it. Okay, maybe our view just now is from the manufacturer part of it. Yes. So how we want to, I mean, what can we do to make sure that all of these parties can work together closely and they could implement each other? Because we have to remember that not everyone able to, how should I put it, assist the other party. Okay, we have to sacrifice some part of a say, for example, in law itself, we have to sacrifice some part of the law in order to make it run. For example, in terms of licensing, yes, over here, we still at this point of time, we don't really know, is it a bus or is it a train, but at this point of time. So maybe from the legal point of view, they have to make some kind of sacrifice, maybe just add on here and there, or they, I mean, yeah, something needs to be done, and communication-wise is very important. As per
so
what
I think, I think I do agree with Adi. So my next question to both speakers here today, in your opinion, okay, after discussing all this, in your opinion, what should be the first question or issue to look into before we do this? I know definition is one of it.
Okay.
What other things?
Is it through the point of view of law or the point of view of what? Both. Okay. Cool.
So, Prof, if you want to take this.
Okay, thanks, Mal. I'm going to take a page from what Adi was saying just now. Let's talk.
Okay.
Okay, the first thing that any sort of step forward in the regulation of a system, the introduction of a new public transport system, I think is getting a forum together. So talking with stakeholders, which include the manufacturers of the system, people who are going to operate the thing, and then also passengers, you know, passenger interest groups, and also the regulators themselves, potential regulators, because we don't really know who they are yet.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Adi?
So I think the first thing to do is get together. There's actually a provision in the then Public Transport Act for this, for the Public Transport Forum.
Yes.
Because many years ago, I remember that Mitrans actually helped to set up the forum to actually operationalize it. So I'm not sure whether it's running now, because I left Mitrans in 2017. And
me 2016, I think.
Yeah. So
All right,
anyway, good luck to the institute, because I think they are running trials and collecting data now, and I think that's the best thing we can do, because any regulatory decision that is made, right, will have to be based on data.
Yeah.
Much more than the data we can get in China, because we need a local context for the data.
Okay, Adi?
I'm totally agree with Prof. Wee. Not because he's my teacher, not because he's my mentor, but I do agree. Okay, just put it into perspective. We are talking right now about art, okay? But both of us coming from legal background, so we can look into those perspectives. But we need to have other people, experts from other point of view, because let me. Okay, I'm sorry to use this. My son. What's it? Powder. Okay. So if you look into one point of view, we cannot see the other point of view. So we need people from other point of view to look at the same exact thing. Then only we can make a decision or discussion about it. Until then, we're going to talk about the same exact thing without taking into consideration of other perspective. This is something that I believe the legal people need to what we call that practice. I'm sorry to use this term. Need to open their door more and look at what have more interaction with people from the industry and stuff. Then only they may come up with something, the law that could assist the industry, not the law that might be some kind of restriction. Because throughout my learning days and also my servicing days, when I ask the students, I ask the people what can they say about the law, they only come with one answer. I mean, most of them come with one answer, which is restriction. Shouldn't law be assistant? Shouldn't the law be like something that could guide us, not restricting?
Facilitation, perhaps, is a better word.
Solicitation.
Pardon, sir?
Solicitation.
It should be facilitation.
Okay, thank you very much for correcting me. Thank you. So I think, I agree with Prof. Wee. I agree with our view just now. The first thing first that we need to do is discussion. We need to talk, and we need to get information, learn. That's the reason why. I mean, if you look at the report, they ask for the help from Mitrans to, do feasibility study, and maybe the discussion today will give, just maybe, some ideas on the direction that you need to go, and maybe from manufacturer point of view, they can, assist the other party with some info and stuff. Then only we can have the I would say, not to say a complete one, but the law that could facilitate the service more, instead of us playing the blame game. This is, and try to find a scapegoat. We should assist each other.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Adi. I think that is a very good point. I have one last question for both of you.
Try to get caught or something.
Last question for both of you. So right now with COVID, public is not confident with public transport.
Sure.
Because that is the place. I don't know. Statistically, right now, I don't think there's a lot of reports to say infections is from public transport. But take it, if let's say public transport is one of it, right? What would be your suggestions for especially the operators to build confidence in the public to use this mode of transportation?
For art, is it?
For art,
okay.
And generally, perhaps because public transportation, we have buses, we have trains, and all other kind of public transportation. So maybe a suggestion for you, for the operators, to build confidence in the public right now.
That question caught me off guard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
While Adi is trying to get his guard back, maybe I'll start the ball rolling first.
Yeah.
The important thing about public transport, or one of its great advantages, is to be able to pack a lot of people into a fairly small place, and then get them all to destinations. Now, with the current COVID conditions, right, you have separation, distancing, and that is a serious disadvantage for public transport. Because you have to probably halve or maybe even less than that, the capacity of the passengers on board the vehicles, right? So the solution perhaps, right, is number one, get everyone vaccinated. And if vaccination is not a complete solution, because not everybody wants to get vaccinated, there are anti-vaxxers around. So we never achieve herd immunity. So I've actually read a report, I think it was published by Bloomberg, which says that, we may be facing this up to 7 to 8 years if we don't get herd immunity. So that's really worrying. So if that is the case, then perhaps you need to look at transportation systems which adapt to a COVID environment. And because everything is closed, in Malaysia, because it's just so hot outside, we literally sweat and melt under the sun. So the system that we use for air conditioning has to be, fitted maybe with like the equivalent of HEPA filters, to filter out the viruses, etc. In addition to keeping social distancing and then frequent sanitizing of the vehicles. I don't see, like chemical sanitizing will really work that effectively. I think probably we'll need to seriously consider UV light,
right,
as a primary means of sanitization.
Okay. Right. Adi, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Tumal and Prof. From my point of view, I do believe we need to extend on how we enforce the law. And not necessarily by creating the law itself alone, but the question right now is the efficiency of the law itself. If you have 700 pages of law, but in terms of enforcement, we're still way behind it. It's like we have only cheap talks and we don't have the right enforcement. So for me, in order for us to gain back the trust of the people to the public transport, I do believe we need to make sure in terms of enforcement is quite tight over there. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm living in Kelantan. Over here, the public transport is not that good. And yeah, the situation is very different in Kuala Lumpur. But still, the question of efficiency of the law itself will be the top, for me, top priority, regardless of whether it is public transport, public places or not. Because if you go out, I mean, right now, you can see a lot of people still wearing the face mask at the neck. Okay, maybe they breathe over here. This is like their breathing system, maybe. Okay, yeah, this is the breathing system, not over here. So maybe, yeah, but still, what will we do with that? Okay, if we can say okay, that's it. So how are we going to enforce the law? So that's the main question. And secondly, I do agree, throughout our discussion today, we point out one important point, namely education. We need to have also efficient type of education with regard to public transport. It is true, there's limited statistic on how serious this virus could spread in public transport. I don't know, but as far as I'm concerned, when I browse it, still the information is very limited.
Yeah.
But do we need to have a statistic? Why don't we try to enforce it properly so that we don't need to have a statistic whereby the public transport could be a very safe means of transportation. For example, maybe, just maybe, my 2 cents, we need to have a conductor in the public transport to control the position of the what we call that, the public, or maybe, we have to go extra miles until this problem is resolved. But until then, from my point of view, it's not only about the law, it's not about the education alone, it's not about the transport, and it's all about the efficiency of how we do things. Same goes to art. if you want to make it efficient, again, we have to study it properly, have a lot of information, which route that we need to use, which route can be used. Because there's one example that I tried to point out, I just found out on internet, if you browse through, Mazda City PRT, aka Personal Rapid Transit. They use the same exact idea of art, but it's for personal usage and within one area of place. So what I'm trying to point out is that, yes, the public transport can be used properly. You can still gain a lot of trust from people, but how are we going to control that? How we want to make sure that the law, the education is efficient. From my point of view, that's my take. Maybe Prof, I have something to add.
Well, I think both speakers made a very, very important points just now, that education is important, implementation of the laws is important. It is as important as the law itself, and the law has to be comprehensive.
That's true.
Right? And I think this is applicable not only to art, it is also applicable to all other laws which will be implemented in the future.
Sure.
So
Sure.
I think that is, unfortunately, we have, yeah, unfortunately, time is up, and I didn't even feel it. I mean, I don't know about you two, but I thought, I look at the clock and I was like, oh, it's 1 hour already. So this has been an interesting discussion. Again, I would like to thank all our viewers on Facebook as well as on Zoom. Thank you very much for the support. Much appreciated to both of our speakers, Dr. Adi and Professor Dr. Erwin. Thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your views and your insights, as well as your expertise in legal perspective and operational perspective. For all the viewers out there, if you want to know more about transport, you can contact either of us. Richard W. Chambers is also open for consultation. I mean, you can visit our Facebook page, our website at www.richardwchambers.com. We have all social medias. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have LinkedIn, we have YouTube. And if you want to watch this again, we will be posting this discussion on YouTube. We also have a podcast on Spotify. So that's it for now. Thank you very much again to the two speakers. I think virtual applause.
Thanks for inviting us, Mar.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
To the viewers, thank you very much. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.